Non-disclosure agreements (NDAs) prevent confidential information being discussed in public. The Department of Transport (DFT) signed 79 NDAs by the end of February, Sky News reports. The shocking claim comes as it was reported the armed forces have set up a no-deal Brexit emergency base in a nuclear bunker below Whitehall. Military chiefs have activated a crack team to plan for no-deal Brexit in the headquarters below the Ministry of Defence as part of Operation Redfold. Up to 3,500 soldiers would be scrambled around the UK in the event of no-deal Brexit chaos at key hubs, according to the military plan. In today's emergency EU summit, European leaders told Theresa May they would only extend Article 50 until May 22, rejecting her demand for an extension until June 30. Meanwhile, European Parliament President Antonio Tajani insists he would be happy if Theresa May revoked Article 50 to cancel Brexit. Speaking to reporters outside the EU summit's venue beforehand, the Prime Minister said she is ready to deliver Brexit 3 years after the EU referendum, even if it means doing it without an agreement. She said, "What is important is that Parliament delivers on the result of the referendum and that we deliver Brexit for the British people. We are nearly 3 years on the referendum. It is time for Parliament to decide." Mrs May's decision to only ask for an extension ending on June 30 has increasingly raised the chances of no deal. Read more. Modern-day Guy Fawkes, a former Downing Street aide, savages May on BBC Newsnight. Armed forces set up no-deal Brexit base in nuclear bunker. Image Getty. Following her formal request sent to European Council President Donald Tusk, the EU chief made clear Brussels will only grant a short delay if the withdrawal agreement struck last November by Mrs May and the EU wins the support of MPs next week. However, cabinet ministers are growing increasingly pessimistic she will be able to secure a majority on her deal after being rejected twice. One minister told the Daily Telegraph Mrs May had given Eurosceptics an incentive to vote against her once again. They said, "She has done a complete turn. She is clearly trying to win over Labour MPs. It won't work. She is losing her support. They are pursuing a strategy that is guaranteed to see the third meaningful vote fail." Theresa May sent Donald Tusk a formal request to extend Article 50. Image Getty. In a desperate bid to win over undecided MPs, the Prime Minister gave a statement on Wednesday night addressed to British citizens, branding the Brexit delay a matter of great personal regret after she insisted 108 times the UK would leave on March 29. She said, "You, the public, have had enough. You are tired of the infighting, tired of the political games and the arcane procedural rows, tired of MPs talking about nothing else but Brexit when you have real concerns about our children's schools, our National Health Service, knife crime. You want this stage of the Brexit process to be over and done with. I agree. I am on your side." Follow Express CO UK for live updates on Brexit. 9:36 p.m. Update. EU 27 feasts on langoustine and roast duckling. Brexit may have left you feeling nauseous, but there's nothing stomach-churning about the EU leaders' dinner tonight. As well as digesting Theresa May's latest Brexit offer on extending Article 50, EU 27 leaders will chew over a starter of green lentil terrine with langoustine, followed by a main of roast duckling, a l'orange with parsnip, mousseline and glazed carrots. Dessert is a variety of chocolates. Very nice indeed. But will Mrs May be devoured along with tonight's feast? Jeremy Corbyn will hold last-ditch talks with Theresa May on Monday. Image Getty. 9:28 p.m. Update. Corbyn, very worried, but set for 11th hour Brexit May summer. Jeremy Corbyn will hold a last-ditch Brexit summit with Theresa May on Monday and is very, very worried about a no-deal. Critics poured scorn on the Labour leader after he flounced out of talks with the Prime Minister and other party leaders because independent group head Chuka Umunna was invited. Mr. Corbyn reportedly claimed the ex-Labour MP is not a real party leader, but with just 8 days until Britain is due to leave the EU on March 29, Mr. Corbyn wants 11th hour talks with Mrs May. The Labour leader told the Daily Mirror, "We're the responsible party here. We're not running down the clock. We're looking for solutions." He revealed Labour will only back Mrs May's withdrawal agreement if she moved towards a softer Brexit. Mr Corbyn added that a no-deal Brexit is a very real threat obviously, and it's made worse by the PM prevaricating. He added, "I'm very clear where the responsibility lies for where we've got to. I feel very, very worried indeed." US film director Tim Burton believes Dumbo will appear before Brexit. Image Getty 8:55 p.m. update. Tim Burton backs Dumbo over Brexit. Oscar-nominated director Tim Burton believes Britons have more chance of seeing a flying elephant than Brexit happening by the end of March. The filmmaker spoke out at the star-studded London premiere of his remake of Walt Disney's Dumbo, which stars Colin Farrell, Michael Keaton and Danny DeVito. Burton's new film hits British cinema screens on March 29, the day Britain is scheduled to leave the EU, but the US director of Beetlejuice, Sleepy Hollow and A Nightmare Before Christmas believes Theresa May's deal will be delayed beyond March 29, Mr Burton said. "We'll see which happens first. I bet the movie comes out before that." EU leaders have lost hope in Theresa May's ability to seal her deal in Parliament. Image Getty 8:42 p.m. update. EU leaders have lost hope May can pass Brexit deal. EU leaders have lost hope Theresa May can pass her Brexit deal with MPs after today's European Council Emergency Summit. An insider claims Mrs May left the meeting this evening as the EU 27 leaders continued to thrash out the Brexit stance over dinner. A draft communique showed the EU offered to extend Article 50 until May 22, the day before the European Parliament elections begin, if MPs back her deal in an expected Commons vote next week. But reports tonight suggest there is huge confusion over a definite extension date, with reports both May 7 and April 11 are both being discussed as dates for Britain to leave the EU. A person familiar with Thursday's Crunch EU talk said the session with May was not good in terms of the atmosphere. The other leaders lost any hope that she can get the deal passed. Sir Keir Starmer and Jeremy Corbyn travel to Brussels on Thursday for Brexit talks. Image Getty 8:22 p.m. update. Starmer in explosive attack on reckless May shadow Brexit Secretary Sir Keir Starmer mounted a furious attack on Theresa May's reckless S&D divisive speech, blaming MPs for the current chaos. The former Attorney General insisted Mrs May has no mandate and no right to threaten our country with a no-deal Brexit. Labour grandee Sir Keir lashed out after Mrs May's speech to the nation on Wednesday, where she scorned MPs for not backing her withdrawal agreement. Speaking tonight after travelling to Brussels with Jeremy Corbyn for talks with the EU, he pinned the blame on Mrs May, claiming, "The reality is that we are in this crisis because of her." Sir Keir tweeted, "The Prime Minister is simply incapable of reflecting on her own failed strategy and the reckless red lines she put down at the beginning of the negotiations. The divisive rhetoric she used last night was simply wrong. Whipping up populism is not the solution and can never be allowed to succeed in our country. We must do all we can to protect the values of our democracy." Lord Kerr, who wrote Article 50, claims revoking Brexit can't be done without election or referendum. Image Getty 7:52 p.m. update. Article 50 author insists it can't be revoked without another referendum. Author of Article 50 is adamant it can't be revoked without a referendum or general election. Lord Kerr of Kinlochard was speaking after more than 1 million people signed a petition begging Theresa May to revoke Article 50. But Lord Kerr said he doubts if that is politically doable. He told the BBC one would have to go back to the people to get authority to do something different from what the people asked for. Chaos reigns over Article 50 extension date. Image Getty 7:05 p.m. update. Chaos over Article 50 Brexit extension date. Conflicting reports suggest there is still huge confusion over the Article 50 extension leaving date. The EU had agreed a May 22 extension to Britain's EU leaving date of March 29, it was reported earlier. But Express.co.uk in Brussels understands leaders are arguing over several dates, including a lengthy delay until June 30, a short hop to May 7 with or without Mrs May's deal signed, and The original May 22 French President Emmanuel Macron is said to have pushed for a May 7 extension date. Jean-Claude Juncker and Donald Tusk are due to hold a press conference later this evening before Theresa May speaks. Government has signed hundreds of non-disclosure agreements, NDA, Sky News claims. Image Getty, 6:45 p.m. update. Government takes out hundreds of gagging orders. The government has put in place hundreds of gagging orders as part of its no-deal Brexit plans, it is claimed. Whitehall departments have signed non-disclosure agreements, NDA, to keep confidential information secret. The Department for Transport, DFT, has signed 79 separate NDAs, with 50 signed in the last 3 months before February, Sky News reports. It is thought the NDAs affect DFTs, hauliers, public transport companies, infrastructure operators and petrol retailers. The Department of Health and Social Care has signed 24 gagging orders, with the Department for Exiting the European Union taking out 7. Sky believes Lloyd Russell Moyle claims he was assaulted and blames Mrs. May for whipping up hatred of MPs. Image Getty, 6:22 p.m. update. MP warns May has whipped up hate after assault. Labour MP Lloyd Russell Moyle accused Theresa May of having whipped up hate after he claims he was almost assaulted by a man attacking him as a traitor. The MP for Brighton and Kent Town appeared to blame the incident on Mrs. May's speech to the Commons yesterday, where she claimed MPs were at fault for the no-deal Brexit chaos. He said, "The incident happened as he was out in Kempton with an ITV film crew." Mr. Russell Moyle tweeted, "A man came up and started shouting at the TV crew and me, saying MPs are the problems. To assault me, grabbed 3 grown men had to prise him off me. This is not normal. I'm representing my constituents." But Theresa May has whipped up fear and division with her speech last night. He urged his followers to join Saturday's March for Europe in London. Anna Soubry reveals anger over death threats and traitor jibes. Image Getty, 5:45 p.m. update. Soubry reveals death threat fears and anger over traitor attacks. Independent group MP Anna Soubry says she can't go home because of death threats. The ex-Conservative MP spoke out after Theresa May's speech on Wednesday blamed MPs for the Brexit crisis. Her fellow independent group MP, Chuka Amuna, has also been the victim of death threats, Mrs. Soubry claimed. She said, "I can't go home this weekend. I'm not able to go home this weekend. I'm not safe." When a senior police officer tells your partner that, if it was his wife in the situation that I am in, he would say, "I am frightened for her safety," I think that tells you everything. I'm not alone in this. I mean, Chuka has obviously had death threats. So many of us have had that, but this is the reality of it. That's why the language that politicians and indeed everybody uses, including the media, is so important. We are tired of being called traitors. When people use that language, the next thing that happens is that I get an email that says, "Traitors get beheaded." That's what should happen to you. Armed Forces sets up no-deal Brexit base in nuclear bunker below Mod. Image Getty, 5:32 p.m. update. Armed Forces set up no-deal Brexit base in nuclear bunker. The Armed Forces has activated an emergency team in a nuclear bunker below the Ministry of Defence to plan for a no-deal Brexit. A unit known as Operation Redfold will also direct 3,500 soldiers around the UK if Britain leaves without a deal. From Monday, troops will be ready to be scrambled to spots around the UK. The plan will see the government's Operation Yellowhammer Doomsday Plan put into place. The command and control structure will be in place across Whitehall, according to The Sun. EU leaders won't extend Article 50 beyond May 22. It is reported. Image Getty, 4:52 p.m. update. Breaking: EU to extend Article 50 until May 22. The EU will extend Article 50 only until May 22, the day before the start of the European Parliament elections. An extension will only be given if Parliament backed Theresa May's deal. According to BuzzFeed's Alberto Nardelli, the Brexit draft conclusions said, the European Council commits to agreeing to an extension until the 22nd of May 2019, provided the withdrawal agreement is approved by the House of Commons next week. Given that the UK does not intend to hold elections to the European Parliament, no extension is possible beyond that date. During this afternoon's emergency EU summit, Theresa May reportedly refused to answer what she would do if MPs failed to back her deal. Mrs. May had said she would not ask for an extension beyond June 30th, with the May 22nd deadline dependent on MPs voting for her withdrawal agreement in the Commons. The Prime Minister has now left the EU emergency summit. Conservative MP Richard Graham calls for Brexit perspective with Rwanda tweet. Image Twitter at Richard Graham 4:50 p.m. update. MP urges Brexit perspective with Rwanda killings tweet. A Conservative MP has urged Britain to come together, citing former enemies in Rwanda who reconciled. Richard Graham tweeted a photo of a Hutu who killed 4 children of the Tutsi man he is hugging. Mr. Graham tweeted, 25 years ago in Rwanda the Hutu on the right killed all 4 children of the Tutsi on the left, throwing 2 of them into a river. Last week they embraced and reconciled. If they
can come together, then so can every Remainer.
Blast Theresa May's speech blaming MPs for Brexit. Image Getty 4:39 p.m. update. Independent group lashes out at Theresa May for blaming MPs. Independent group MPs Chukwuemeka and Anna Sobri have united to blast Theresa May's speech to the nation on Wednesday night, blaming MPs for Brexit. Ex-Conservative MP Mrs. Sobri said, "Nobody can be under any illusions about how appalling that speech was." A former Labour MP Mr. Omamna said, "I think there's an acknowledgement that they got that spectacularly wrong." CBI leader Caroline Farabeen fearful of no-deal Brexit. National emergency. Image Getty 4:19 p.m. update. Business and trade union leaders warns of Brexit. National emergency. Business and trade union leaders have issued a joint letter warning against a no-deal Brexit. Caroline Farabeen, head of the Confederation of British Industry, insisted a no-deal Brexit on March 29 would be a full-scale national emergency because business can't possibly be ready for something like this. She told Sky News, "It would be a wrecking ball for our economy, which is why we completely agree with the Trade Union Congress. Tuck, it's time for a new approach, it's time for compromise." Meanwhile, Francis O'Grady, the TUC's General Secretary, said, "The problem is there are millions of workers whose livelihoods depend on decent businesses, investment and free and easy access to markets, and if we haven't got that, then that threatens jobs and livelihoods." Andrea Leadsom dismisses petition calling for Article 5 vote to be revoked. Image Getty 4 p.m. update. A million-sign petition to revoke 4. Article 50. A petition calling for Article 5 to be revoked has collected more than 1 million signatures, the highest rate of sign-ups on record. On Thursday, the sheer number of people trying to sign crashed the online petition. But despite the petition's popularity, Andrea Leadsom, the leader of the Commons, told MPs, should the petition reach more than 17.4 million signatures, there would be a very clear case for taking action. The 17.4 million figure she cited is the number of people who voted to leave the EU. The petition demands revoke Article 50 and remain in the EU. The government repeatedly claims exiting the EU is the will of the people. We need to put a stop to this claim by proving the strength of public support now for remaining in the EU. A people's vote may not happen, so vote now. Antonio Tajani says Article 50 should be extended no later than April 18. Image Getty 3:50 p.m. update. Tajani gives April 18 deadline for brief Article 50 extension. European Parliament President Antonio Tajani insists Britain should have an Article 50 extension, but until no later than April 18. He is adamant Britain should leave the EU before Theresa May's government has time to organise EU elections, which will be held in May. If Mrs. May revoked Article 50 it would make him happy, he insisted, as he warned against negative consequences of a no-deal Brexit. Mr. Tajani said, "I requested any extension be as brief as possible and no later than April 18, which would be the last date possible for UK to organise EU elections. An extension would only make sense if next week there were to be an agreement in the House of Commons on the withdrawal agreement. He added, if the UK decides to revoke Article 50, then I'll be happy, but that's a choice for the UK to make. The worst thing that could happen is no deal. No deal would just have negative consequences for everybody, and in particular for the UK. Polish PM Mateusz Morawiecki offers sympathy for Theresa May of a tough Brexit crisis. Image Getty, 3:32 p.m. Update. Polish PM admits May's situation is tough. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki has urged more time Theresa May to get her tough Brexit deal through Parliament. Mr. Morawiecki was speaking ahead of Thursday's Crunch EU summit on Brexit. He called on European leaders not to exacerbate the Prime Minister's Brexit crisis as she battles to win support for her withdrawal agreement among MPs. He said, "This morning I spoke to Prime Minister May and I am aware of the situation. The situation is tough in the British Parliament and there is no need to exacerbate it. And there is no need to raise the temperature any further and diminish the likelihood of Britain's Parliament working out a formula which will be acceptable for them. Making additional demands, as some are doing, lessens the likelihood of Britain agreeing to what is a good deal negotiated by Michel Barnier, and given our consent at the end of last year, we are also underlining it is worth giving the UK the chance to work out an internal compromise and texted the agreement or negotiations by 2 to 3 months. Commons Speaker assures MPs they aren't traitors after Theresa May speech. Image Parliament TV, 3:15 p.m. Update. Bercow tells MPs, you aren't traitors. John Bercow has fired a broadside at Theresa May after she blamed MPs for her failure to secure a Brexit deal. The Commons Speaker told MPs, none of you is a traitor, the day after Mrs. May's speech to the nation, where she accused MPs of letting down the country. His comments came a week after he blocked MPs having a third vote on Mrs. May's withdrawal agreement. Mr. Bercow said, none of you is a traitor. All of you are doing your best. This should not be, and I'm sure will not, prove to be a matter of any controversy whatsoever. From the chair, let me say that I believe passionately in the institution of Parliament, in the rights of members of this House and in their commitment to the duty, and I use the word duty in the singular, advisedly. The sole duty of every member of Parliament is to do what he or she thinks is right. There is nothing in my judgment to be added. 2:35 p.m. Update. Brexit delay is UK's last chance to avoid a no-deal Brexit. Sebastian Kurz, Austria's Prime Minister, said, the delay does not rule out a no-deal. The delay does not solve all our problems, but the delay can be a last chance to prevent a hard Brexit. And we should realize this last chance. Theresa May pictured during a meeting with Donald Tusk. Image Twitter, Donald Tusk, 2:25 p.m. Update. Emmanuel Macron is open only to a technical extension, as short as possible, said, this is an extremely important moment for our European project. Prime Minister May requested a technical extension. We will talk about that, but I am open to a technical extension which must be as short as possible. We must be clear with ourselves, with the UK and with the citizens. We have been working on the agreement for 2 years. It cannot be renegotiated. In case of a negative British vote, we would go to a no deal. We know it. We cannot have an excessive extension because it affects our ability to decide and act. I am waiting to find out what Barnier, Tusk and legal services say about the dates and the election. If there is a delay, it will be technical. We can't accept a prolongation without goals, without visibility. We must adapt to the British political crisis, but there will not be an extension to renegotiate. We have been doing this for 2 years. No extension either if there is not a clear majority to give a mandate on the future relationship. We must respect the will of the British people, but also the European project. European leaders understand and respect the will of the British people, but we defend the interests of our own people, Mr. Macron added. Brexit was a choice of the British people, not of the French, warning his country is ready to face the consequences of a no-deal Brexit. We are ready for Brexit. France didn't choose this. The British people did. We can feel sorry about it, but we have had time to prepare for it legally and technically. The European project must continue. and must be stronger. 2:15 p.m. update. Junior Brexit ministers briefing on Brexit revealed if Robert Peston said he has seen a briefing note prepared for Kwasi Kwarteng, a junior Brexit minister, where he was told to avoid saying that MPs face a choice between backing the PM's deal and a no-deal Brexit. Mr. Peston continued, expecting to be asked in interviews that it's no deal if you lose a third meaningful vote on the PM's deal. Kwarteng is told to reply, "You're getting ahead of yourselves," elsewhere in the note, headed "Top Lines and Q. MPs will have to decide how to proceed. There is no suggestion that a no-deal Brexit is the automatic consequence." 1:56 p.m. update. Jean-Claude Juncker confirms emergency EU summit is in the pipeline. Jean-Claude Juncker confirmed the EU will hold an emergency meeting next week if the House of Commons rejects from the third time the withdrawal agreement. He said, in the event the withdrawal agreement would not be approved by the House of Commons, we will have a second meeting of the European Council next week. Angela Merkel said the EU has good intentions and wants to avoid a hard border in Northern Ireland. Image Getty. 1:52 p.m. update. Xavier Bettel would accept a delay lasting until the EU elections. The debate today will be, as always, friendly and diplomatic, but firm. We want to know what May wants. We know what they do not want, but we do not know what it is that they want. I would only accept a delay if it is before the European elections. 1:45 p.m. update. Angela Merkel says the EU is full of good intentions. Everyone is aware that this summit is a historical event and that's why we have to treat it carefully and work until the last minute to achieve a regulated exit. This means that we have to keep interests of both sides in mind. Therefore, the discussion with the British Prime Minister is very important because she will once again explain to us from her perspective how she sees things, and we will then make a judgment. One option is still the intensively negotiated documents plus the addition in Strasbourg, which I believe is very good and important, that this will get a majority in the British Parliament, but we also have to be prepared that this might not happen, and therefore we will decide every day, even after this summit, about what we can still do, and this doesn't just depend on us but also in Great Britain. But I would also like to emphasize, the agreement was well negotiated and therefore our scope is limited, but we are full of good intentions to find a solution, and we believe and hope, which would also be good for Britain and the entire Irish questions, because if there is an unregulated Brexit then there will be a border of the single market between Northern Ireland, and these are things we want to avoid. 1:34 p.m. update. Pedro Sanchez asks UK whether it wants to take part in EU elections or not. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said the UK must clarify whether they want to take part in the EU elections, as it would open different Brexit scenarios. He also said the extension to Article 50 is not the only issue to debate at this summit. Speaking to reporters, the Spanish Prime Minister said, "This is a very important European Council for the future of Europe and the future of Spain. We will talk about Brexit and we will hear the opinion of May, which is essential to decide if we extend it or not, but there are also other issues, industrial policy and competition policy. We want competition policy to adapt to the new era. Thirdly, there will be a debate on whether commercial negotiations with the United Kingdom will be initiated. Finally, the relationship of the EU with China is another topic. First of all, I think it's good to know for sure what the British government's request is. We have elections just around the corner. If they want to participate, we can talk about different scenarios." Pedro Sanchez speaking to reporters. Image Getty. 1:20 p.m. update. Theresa May to choose a no-deal over a long extension. Cabinet source said they don't believe Mrs. May's deal will go through Parliament next week, leaving the Prime Minister with a choice between a long extension and a no-deal Brexit. Sky News' Beth Rigby said, if left with a similar choice, the cabinet source said Mrs. May would back a no-deal. The Sky News deputy political editor said, cabinet source today tells me they are now skeptical deal will pass. Source thinks she will bend to her party and go for no deal. 1:10 p.m. update. Dutch Prime Minister said people feel Britain is a diminished country. Mark Rutte made the astounding claim people have the feeling that the UK is now a diminished country, arriving to the EU summit's venue. He also said a no-deal Brexit would be a catastrophe for the UK, urging the EU to facilitate a positive outcome in the British Parliament when it votes next time. Mr. Rutte added Mrs. May is facing an inhuman task, and no one can allow any incidents or mistakes. Mark Rutte, left, said people feel the UK is now a diminished country. Image Getty, 1 p.m. update. Lithuania's Prime Minister blasts UK saying it doesn't know what it wants. Lithuanian leader Dalia Grybauskaitė said there is no point in the EU giving anything to the UK, as Britain doesn't know what it wants. Speaking to reporters upon arriving at the EU summit's venue, she added she expects a short extension will be granted. She said, I expect we will agree today to some date of extension, not necessarily June, could be May. And some conditions also will be discussed. We will do everything we can from our side, but UK needs to take serious and final decision. The UK needs to decide. Extension would probably only be until May, or a long extension. In that case, the UK will need to organise European Parliament elections. We need to be prepared for everything, but of course we all hope to find a solution. 12:55 p.m. update. Chaos reigns in London, says Ireland as it pledges to back short extension. Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar said chaos reigns in London upon arriving to the venue of the summit. Mr. Varadkar said, the situation in London is somewhat chaotic at the moment. We need to cut the entire British establishment a little bit of slack on this and support their request for a short extension. No deal will only ever be a British choice. I think there is an openness to an extension across the board, but we can't have a situation whereby we have a rolling cliff edge, where we just put off decisions and deadlines every couple of months. Brexit will require some very hard choices for the United Kingdom. It was never going to be all good and no bad. 12:45 p.m. update. Theresa May pledges to take the UK out of the EU without a deal if necessary. Asked whether she is ready to take the UK out of the EU without a deal, Theresa May said, what is important is that Parliament delivers on the result of the referendum and that we deliver Brexit for the British people. I sincerely hope we can do that with a D, but what matters is that we deliver Brexit, the decision of the British people. We are nearly 3 years on the referendum. It is time for Parliament to decide. She also explained why a short extension could help the UK leaving with a deal. She said, a request of a short extension would give Parliament the time to make a final choice that delivers on the result of the referendum. We are here as leaders of 28 countries discussing the global challenges that we face. Although we are leaving the Union, we will continue to have shared interests, our shared security and prosperity, so we will continue to be involved in discussions. 12:30 p.m. update. Austria's leader brands absurd Britain taking part to the EU's Parliament elections. Sebastian Kurz said he doesn't want to see the UK taking part in the EU election planned for May, and branded the possibility of still seeing elected British MEPs in the European Parliament absurd. Mr. Kurz, an Eurosceptic, added Austria supports an extension only if important questions are answered by the UK. Theresa May said it is important to deliver Brexit, even without a deal. Image Sky News. 12:10 p.m. update. Jeremy Corbyn doesn't rule out a second referendum. Speaking outside the EU's headquarters in Brussels, Mr. Corbyn didn't rule out a second referendum. He said, in our own conference proposal from last year, there is a demand for an option for a confirmatory vote to be put to the British people at the end of any negotiation, and we are considering what proposal we put to the British Parliament. He also said he believes Parliament would back his Brexit proposal by March 29 if put to MPs, which would avoid a no-deal Brexit. He continued, we think that what we are proposing can be achieved in the British Parliament, and we believe we can construct a majority which would prevent us from crashing out and the chaos which would come with it. There is a great concentration of minds in Parliament because of the danger of crashing out without a deal, and the problem that would cause for jobs, transport, supplies and all other issues. And when asked why the EU should back him rather than help the Prime Minister getting her deal through Parliament, he said, "I have a constructive relationship with the EU. We didn't start these negotiations with being critical of the EU. There has to be a constructive relationship both with Europe and Parliament, but the Prime Minister seems to think she can run down the clock by constantly threatening the British Parliament with a no-deal exit unless they support her deal." Jeremy Corbyn leaving the EU's headquarters after speaking to Michel Barnier. Image Joe Barnes, 12:05 p.m. Update. Jeremy Corbyn is looking for a deal that will be backed by a majority in Parliament. Jeremy Corbyn arrived in Brussels earlier this morning to discuss his Brexit plan with Michel Barnier. Speaking to reporters outside the EU's headquarters, he described the talks constructive, adding, "Our determination is to find an agreement which prevents a no-deal Brexit and allows a future constructive relationship with the European Union. This morning's meeting has been positive. We have done what I believe Parliament ought to be doing, which is instead of bringing back a twice-rejected deal to Parliament, instead looking for a constructive alternative, which is what I told the Prime Minister during yesterday's meeting." When asked why he isn't backing Mrs May's deal, he said, "The Prime Minister's deal has been flatly rejected twice by Parliament. We do not believe it is the way forward and therefore we are looking for an alternative that can command a majority in Parliament." And when asked how he thinks Britons will trust him, saying he wants to find a cross-party solution after he walked out from yesterday's meeting with Mrs May, he said he had spoken extensively to her later on the same night to find alternative solutions and he will do so again next week. Head-to-head, leader of the opposition to Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn speaking to reporters outside the EU's headquarters. Image Sky News, 11:52 a.m. Germany would be hit for €10 billion a year under hard Brexit, despite Angela Merkel's strong words this morning. New report by German independent foundation Bertelsmann Stiftung has found Germany would be hit by £10 billion in income. The doom-laden figures also show Britain could lose £49 billion, €57 billion. Other nations hit would be France at €6.90 billion, €8 billion, and Italy at €3.47 billion, €4 billion. The authors said an approved withdrawal agreement would significantly mitigate these figures. 11:45 a.m. Update. Jeremy Corbyn mocked by his own MP after walking out from Brexit crisis talks. Labour MP Ian Murray tweeted an ironic attack on Jeremy Corbyn's walkout from Brexit crisis talks, highlighting how Mr Corbyn is failing to champion a second referendum campaign like Chuka Umunna is, despite it being Labour Party policy. He said, as for Jeremy Corbyn, he was right to walk out of talks with the PM tonight because that Chuka Umunna was attending. Chuka would have championed what is Labour Party policy in a public vote. How dare Chuka champion the policy of Labour members? That's the leadership's job. Disgraceful. Mr Murray later said his tweet was ironic. He wrote, "Thanks for all the messages and emails. This was irony. I should know better than to think Twitter is irony." Jeremy Corbyn has arrived in Brussels for his meeting with Michel Barnier. Image Getty, 11:30 a.m. Update. Theresa May wants MPs to vote on deal as soon as possible, says spokesman. The Prime Minister's spokesman said Theresa May is working incredibly hard to see her deal going through Parliament at the next meaningful vote. Mrs May, he continued, will keep on engaging with MPs to gather support for her deal, but, despite the spokesman said the government wants the vote to take place as soon as possible. The third meaningful vote has yet to be scheduled. Andrea Leadsom told MPs they will be updated next week on when they will be given the chance to vote on the deal. She said, "This is a fluid situation. As soon as we have a response from the EU Council, I will be able to update the House as to when we can bring forward a meaningful vote and a debate next week. It is certainly the Prime Minister's intention to do so." 11:25 a.m. Update. Luxembourg's Prime Minister says there are more non-options than options on the table. Luxembourg's Prime Minister Xavier Bettel said Britain can only be granted a Brexit delay beyond the European elections if it participates in the vote, but the current priority is to make progress in an environment when all options have seemingly been ruled out. He said, "I heard your Speaker of Parliament saying he doesn't want another vote on the withdrawal text. I heard European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker saying he doesn't want to reopen the vote, so at the moment there are more non-options on the table than options. I sometimes have the feeling that we are in the waiting room, a bit like waiting for Godot, but Godot never came, so I hope this time they will come. Theresa May leaving the UK to head to Brussels. Image LNP 11:10 AM update, DUP not there yet on backing Theresa May's withdrawal agreement. The 10 DUP MPs propping up Theresa May's government are still not ready to back her Brexit deal. Sammy Wilson told Irish broadcaster RTE, "No, we're not yet. We will however continue to talk to the Prime Minister because we think it is our duty to try and undo some of the damage included in the withdrawal agreement, but we have made it quite clear that unless there is a legal means by which Northern Ireland would not be treated differently from the United Kingdom, not just assurances or promises but acting legislation, we will not be supporting the withdrawal agreement." 10:50 PM update. Barclays chairman says the EU would be harmed very significantly by a no deal Brexit. John Thomas McFarlane OBE, Barclays chairman, said a no-deal Brexit would hurt the EU very significantly. Speaking at a Brexit conference, he said, in the event of a no-deal Brexit, it would hurt the EU very significantly, and in a bid to quash the worries of the financial sector in London, which has historically spoken out against leaving the bloc without an agreement securing the future relationship between Brussels and the UK, the Barclays boss added the EU is likely whatever form Brexit takes. John Thomas McFarlane OBE issued a stark warning address to the EU. Image Getty 10:25 AM update. A former European Commission president believes the EU 27 may agree on a long extension. Former president of the European Commission Romano Prodi believes EU leaders could back a long extension to Article 50. The Italian politician and economist told Today, "I still think that there will be more time. There will be some compromise in order to get more time because really the common will against a hard Brexit is real." 10 AM update. Theresa May's deal could be backed next week, says junior Brexit Minister Kwasi Kwarteng believes there is a good chance the withdrawal agreement will be backed by a majority at the third meaningful vote next week. The junior Brexit minister told Sky News, "We have a good shot at actually landing the deal next week. People are coming already because people's minds are focusing on the deal and the ability to leave the EU in a timely and orderly way." 9:40 AM update. Britain's financial services have been thrown under a bus. City of London Financial District Chief Catherine McGuinness heavily criticised how the government has handled Brexit. She claimed that financial services have been thrown under a bus in terms of Britain's efforts to secure a divorce settlement with the bloc. She said, "It's imperative we avoid a no-deal Brexit. An extension would be welcome and let's hope our EU partners agree to that, but it would only be a sticking plaster unless the deep underlying issues are resolved and we actually make progress. To me it feels like we are caught in something of a hamster wheel." UK Financial Services Minister John Glenn also said that the sector had every right to feel frustrated with Britain's failure so far to secure a divorce settlement with just a week to go before Brexit Day. Timeline to end the Brexit deadlock. Image Express 9:25 AM update. EU may hold emergency summit on March 29. Jeremy Hunter. EU could hold an emergency summit at the 11th hour to offer the UK an extension with potentially onerous conditions such as holding another referendum, British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt said. He told BBC Radio, "There could be and we don't know. There will be an EU emergency summit to offer us an extension. We don't know what the length would be and it could have some very onerous conditions." 9 AM update. Jacob Rees-Mogg set out 4 demands for her to gain from the EU summit. A letter signed by 39 MP was sent to Theresa May ahead of her trip to Brussels. MPs part of the Eurosceptic erg told Mrs May she should have no reason to fear leaving on the 29th of March, and they added they will only back her deal on a third meaningful vote if she secures from Brussels legally binding changes to the withdrawal agreement, e.g. a unilateral exit clause, a legal end date or Malthouse alternative arrangements. Jacob Rees-Mogg told Theresa May there is no reason to fear leaving the EU on March 29. Image Getty 8:50 PM update. Angela Merkel told the UK to approve a deal or leave the EU next week. Angela Merkel has expressed her frustration over the Brexit delay with the German Chancellor warning Theresa May the EU will only agree an extension if her deal is passed through Parliament. Speaking in the Bundestag a day after Prime Minister Theresa May requested a 3-month delay to Britain's departure for the bloc, Angela Merkel said it is unfortunate that there is still no way forward on Brexit. With just 8 days to go before the UK leaves the EU, Mrs. Merkel admitted she still does not have definite answers. She said, "One question, which has kept us all busy in the last days and weeks, how will the exit of Great Britain from the EU happen? And unfortunately I have to tell you today that 8 days before the official exit of GB we still don't have a definite answer to that, with just 8 days before the UK is due to leave the EU. The Prime Minister will make the case for extending the Article 50 withdrawal process to June 30 at a Brussels summit today." Mrs. Merkel warned the short delay would only be honoured by the EU if MPs back Mrs. May's deal in a vote. She said the Brexit delay would be discussed positively today, but added that member states would have to be mindful ahead of the European elections in May. Mrs. Merkel said, "We, the EU 27, will discuss this today. We can fulfill this wish in principle if there will be a positive vote about the exit deal next week in the British Parliament. However, regarding the concrete date we have to be mindful that we have the European elections in May, which means the future and the legality of the European elections need to be preserved. But we can surely talk positively about a short delay." Angela Merkel issued an ultimatum to the UK. Image Getty, 8:35 p.m. Update: MPs would back a no-way-style deal, says Tory MP. Parliament should be given the opportunity to find an alternative way to leave the European Union, according to Tory MP Oliver Letwin. He said, "The idea would be to have a day where members of Parliament across the parties can bring forward alternative propositions and see whether, as I hope and believe, it will be possible we can get a majority for some alternative." The Conservative MP believes that, if given the chance, a majority of MPs would be ready to back a Norway-style relationship with Brussels. He continued, "I believe that we will probably on that day be able to get a cross-party majority in favour of what is sometimes called Norway Way Plus. A Norway-style deal would see the UK staying in the EU's single market and a customs union. Almost 90% of Brits consider the UK's handling of Brexit a national humiliation." Image Getty, 8:20 a.m. Update: These 3 countries could veto a Brexit delay. France, Spain and Belgium are ready to block an extension of any length to Article 50 if Theresa May can't convince them she has a credible plan to break the deadlock in the House of Commons. Jean-Yves Le Drian, France's foreign minister, said, "A situation in which Mrs. May is unable to deliver sufficient guarantees on the credibility of her strategy at the European Council would lead to the request being refused and a preference for no deal, and a source said, a no-deal Brexit would be damaging and it's absolutely not what we want, but I think we're ready to go to this because there are only 2 solutions: a deal is accepted or there is no deal." 8:05 a.m. Update: 9 out of 10 Brits considers UK's handling of Brexit a national humiliation. A poll carried out by Sky Data found that 90% of Brits believe the way Brexit has been handled by the government represents a national humiliation. Only 7% of the people polled don't feel it has been an embarrassing process, and 3% have no opinion on it.